The following is a production of Cary TV, the Town of Cary's government access channel.
So we now call to order the Planning and Zoning meeting for the 18th of May. First order of business today is adoption of the agenda. Does anyone have any changes? If not, I would be willing to hear a motion to adopt it.
So moved.
Mr. Rogers, any second?
Second.
All in favor of adopting the agenda, please signify by saying aye for me, please.
Aye.
And motion carries. Thank you very much. The next order of our business is the approval of 3 sets of minutes. And I would like to know, if there are no changes, can we do all 3 sets of minutes in one motion, or must we do something individually? We can do all 3? All right. Does anyone, first of all, does anyone have any changes or suggestions or edits to any of the 3 sets of minutes that we have? If not, then a motion to approve would take care of all 3.
Make a motion to approve.
All right.
Second.
Okay, any discussion on that? All in favor of adopting all 3 of the minutes, signify by saying aye, please.
Aye.
Thank you. That motion also carries unanimously. We next move to the 2 cases that require a public hearing, and I have a few rules that we have to establish before we go ahead there, and I'll read from this paper to make sure I cover them all. First of all, we will have a member of the staff introduce the particular case at the podium, and then after that, we will open the public hearing. The first person we will hear from at that point is the applicant, who shall have 10 minutes to present their case to us. After the applicant's presentation, we will allow 1 person at a time to come and speak at the podium on the particular case. You'll please give the clerk a comment card that has your name and other information on it. When you step up to the podium, would you please go to the podium closest to the clerk, not the one with the computer screen in front of it, but the one that would be on your left up there, if you will. And you will find up there that there's a little timer box that will help you along. All we ask is that the first thing you tell us, please, is your name, and we may ask you to spell it for us just to be accurate, so bear with us on that. And then after that, when you begin to address the board, you will see those lights go on. You're going to have a green light that will tell you you've got your 5 minutes to speak, and throughout most of that 5-minute period, the light will be green. At the 32nd point, the light will turn yellow, and then when your time has expired, it will begin to flash red, and I will ask you to really conclude and wrap up. We may have quite a few people, so I would appreciate your indulgence. On the right hand, on your left up there, on our right-hand side, you may queue up there to the right-hand side of the aisle to facilitate moving along a little more quickly. We have a couple of rules when you do come here to speak. We would ask that you be concise, not repeat to having person after person come and tell us the same sorts of things. Please respect that 5-minute time limit. If there's a large group and you do plan to say the same thing, maybe you can appoint a spokesperson to represent all of your interests when you do that. Your comments can be directed to all of us. We would prefer they not go to any particular board member, and there will not be any interchange between you and us. We will just be here to listen to you. We want to hear everything you have to say. And we will not interact in any way. When you're done, you may return to your seat any way you like, and then after that, I will close the public hearing when there are no more speakers. At that point, the members of the board and I will ask questions of the applicant or of the staff member, and then we will take some sort of action, and that will be explained to you as we move along. Have I neglected anything in that list? All right, if that's all covered, then I guess we will go to our very first case, 14-REZ36. Ms. Bierman.
Good evening. This is a public hearing on a request to modify existing zoning conditions applicable to a portion of the Cary Town Center Shopping Center. It's located on Southeast Maynard Road between Walnut Street and Cary Town Boulevard. This is a vicinity map. There are several parcels associated with Cary Town Center. This rezoning request only involves the area that's bordered by the yellow. This is just a closer view of the site. You can see the existing buildings and, again, the boundary in purple. The existing zoning on the site is general commercial conditional use. There are a number of zoning conditions, 19 zoning conditions that were approved with a rezoning case in 1990 on this property. This rezoning request consists of 2 changes. One would increase the maximum building height for a portion of the site from 2 stories, as is stated in the current zoning conditions, to 60 feet. And also there has been a condition added for replacement of the existing fence along the eastern boundary of the Cary Town Center site adjacent to Ivy Meadows. This is a map that illustrates the boundary of the site. Again, the area in green here shows the area that could be affected by the new 60-foot height limit. Currently, the zoning conditions call for 2 stories, and so this would potentially increase the building height. This is stated as being an area within 1,000 feet of the property owned by the Triangle Aquatic Center. You'll note that there is an area of 250 feet from the boundary of the site where there is a building setback here adjacent to this residential area, which is why that area does not show in the green, because that would not be eligible for the higher height. The red line that you see is the length of the area where fencing is proposed to be replaced. And that does extend off of the parcel that's included in the request, but the applicant has committed to replacing the entirety of that fence. This is a land use plan. The plan designation for the site is commercial. It shows that there are no stream buffers identified on Cary's GIS maps that would impact the site. This map shows greenway sidewalks and street side trails in the vicinity. Here you can see the road pattern. Walnut Street, Maynard Road, and Cary Town Boulevard are all classified as major thoroughfares. And there are a number of existing C-Tran routes that come onto the property, and one planned route, and then you can also see one triangle transit route as well. This is a map that shows properties that were notified of the public hearing. This is a protest petition map that was received prior to the town council public hearing. This is a valid protest. There were a number of concerns that were expressed in the protest petition and also expressed at the public hearing. You can see a variety of issues here related to a number of specific type issues. I will point out that there has been discussion of a specific use that is a outdoor recreation use that there's been a lot of discussion about. I think this is where a number of these specific concerns arise from. However, I would note that for the purpose of this rezoning request, it's to focus on the height limit and the other change to the zoning conditions. There are other issues. The other issues that are referenced here would come up at a later point if that outdoor recreation use is established that would require a special use permit. At the Town Council public hearing, there were some comments made by council members just requesting clarification on some of the conditions, and also a suggestion that a balloon test be done to provide greater clarity on the building height issue. Since the public hearing, the applicant did make several changes to the conditions. Initially, the height limit was established or was proposed to go from 2 stories to 3 stories. The current limit of 60 feet is a change since the initial public hearing, so it would be changing from 2 stories to 60 feet. Also, the zoning condition to install the new fence adjacent to the Ivy Meadow subdivision has been added as a commitment, and the applicant did conduct a balloon test to illustrate the building height, the 60-foot building height along the area shown in the previous slide in the green area. And the applicant can speak to the results of that test. That concludes staff's comments, and following the public hearing will be available for comments or questions.
Thank you. We will open the public hearing, and of course, we'll hear from the applicant first. And I would like to make one little reiteration before we do that. You'd heard it mentioned that we're going to be talking about the height limit as it pertains to this zoning, and there are some specific uses that were discussed at the town council meeting. We're going to allow a reasonable amount of latitude here. We don't want to stifle anybody, but I will assure you that even if you do mention particular uses, we will not consider that when we make our decision here. So out of respect for the agenda as written and for this rezoning itself, we would ask that you not speak about particular uses, but if 1 or 2 does happen to slip in, we're not going to be considering that tonight when we talk about the rezoning. And with that, I will invite the applicant to come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the Planning and Zoning Board. Jason Barron with Morningstar Law Group, here on behalf of the applicant, CBL and Associates. They are the owners of Cary Town Center and have submitted this rezoning request. Mary's done an excellent job of describing the nature of this request. Before I get into some of the specifics, I want to say I know I speak on behalf of my client when I say we're very excited to be here tonight. The mall has had a steady and gradual decline over a course of several years as market forces have competed against it, as geographic forces have competed against it. You have seen the growth and, well, the birth and growth of North Hills, the redevelopment of North Hills. Crabtree Mall continues to be the anchor regional shopping center, regional mall in this area. And then additionally, the introduction of Streets at South Point, which has been a wildly successful project. It was a greenfield project, and they were able to go in and really, I think, create a vacuum on the type of tenants that ultimately a regional shopping center needs in order to survive. And so, with the Sears going dark at the end of last year, I think that was obviously a disappointment to my client. That's a rent-paying tenant that's no longer there. But I don't think anybody was surprised by it. If you have spent any time at the mall, kudos. You're one of the few, one of the proud. There's just not a lot to bring people to the mall. And I think that the case, we're standing before you tonight because this is the first step in what ultimately we believe and the owners believe will be a rebirth and a redevelopment of the center to start to act and feel more like a 21st century destination. And when I say destination, it's, I think the mall is going to change. I think it's going to look different. It's not going to continue to function because, quite frankly, they can't compete in the marketplace as a regional center. And I don't think that, I don't think Sears will be the last one to close its doors before all of this is said and done. So we're very excited to be here. We're very excited about this opportunity. What that opportunity is, as it relates to tonight, is, as Mary put it, a request to modify existing zoning conditions. And that's what I'm going to speak about tonight, because that's the zoning request that's before you all tonight. When this property was zoned back in 1990, there was a multitude of conditions that were attached to the property. One of those created a height limit of 2 stories, and that is ultimately why this process started, is that, you know, the use that we would like to put there is a use that has more than 2 stories. Now, what 2-story means is fairly amalgamous. It's undefined. It could be anything. It could be 2 stories at 80 feet. It could be 2 stories at 40 feet. It could be what it is right now. In the Dillards, we measured it last week. The Dillards is 54 feet, roughly 54 feet tall. So the 2 stories, you know, going from 2 stories to 60 feet is a clarification. It could be viewed as a reduction about what could already be put on the site. And so the way we have proposed this is, you know, provides clarity for everybody involved, and that is no building in this particular location. When I say this, it's the area shaded in green on the slide that's in front of you all. No building could be taller than 60 feet. In addition to it, as Mary mentioned, we are committing to replacing the fence that is located at the top of the berm. If you spend any time at the site, and I'll get into the balloon test momentarily, if you spend any time at the site, if you've seen how that berm functions and how that buffer functions, it's working. You know, these conditions created the situation. When I say these conditions, the conditions that apply to this property when it was zoned in 1990 created that berm, created that buffer. And here we are 25 years later, it's very mature. The trees that, you know, that were put in as shrubs are now full grown. The trees that were put in as saplings are now full grown. And what you see is a combination of shrubs, bushes, and upper story trees that, with some evergreens, that really is doing a good job of buffering the mall from the adjacent residential community. And Mary, I don't know, do we have the slide, the balloon test link to your presentation? You don't? Well, it's included in your staff report, and I'll walk through briefly, if I could slide over here momentarily. So at the public hearing, the mayor requested that we conduct a balloon test to show what a 60-foot building, how visible a 60-foot building would be from the neighborhood. And we conducted that balloon test along this line here, and that's that green line. And again, one of the conditions that was put on the property back in 1990, that again is a condition that we're not changing as part of this process, is there is a 250-foot existing building setback from the property line along Ivy Lane to the closest point of any building. You can see this is the corner of the Sears. That's just about 250 feet. And I know Mr. Rogers came out and witnessed a portion of the balloon test. And as was shown in your report, the balloon was set up in 3 different locations. One of them was here. One of them was close to the corner of the building here. And then over here, this was actually a lower spot, and we were concerned about a light pole. So we actually slid it a little bit closer to the property line. We didn't want to slide it any farther away because we didn't want any folks to believe that we were playing cute with the balloon test. But essentially, the pictures that are included in your staff report, for the most part, you don't see a balloon in those pictures. And again, the reason why is that buffer is working. If Mr. Rogers was there and he could witness it and could share with you all, having been there, I was surprised when they put the balloon 60 feet high. When you take the buffer and the trees that are planted on top of that buffer, those are far in excess of 60 feet. The total height of that is far in excess of 60 feet. So from what the purpose of the test was, the test was intended to serve as an understanding of, okay, worst case scenario as it relates to this rezoning. If a 60-foot tall building was put somewhere along this line, how visible is it going to be? And generally speaking, with limited exception, it's not incredibly visible based upon the results of the balloon test. And part of that is because that existing buffer is very tall, it's very mature, and in my opinion, it's very effective. It's doing the job that it was supposed to do back in 1990 and has continued to do that. With regard to the fence, we've committed to replacing the fence just because if you look at it right now, it's your old clapboard fence. It's doing fine. It's serving as a visual buffer, but it could look better. So when we redevelop, we're going to be taking that down and putting it back. As Mary mentioned, this is in a regional activity center. This is designated to be the most intense portion of the town. The height recommendations included in the land use plan for this area for regional activity centers is 10 stories, 11 stories for vertically integrated mixed use. So we believe a height limit of 60 feet, which is effectively a 3-story building, or it could be 4 stories or 5 stories, but it is a more than reasonable compromise given the location of this property, the fact that it's in a regional activity center, and that it is adjacent to existing residential. And again, we have a 250-foot building setback that remains unchanged as part of this case. So we believe that the height limitation that we've suggested as part of this case is not only reasonable under the circumstances, but it certainly appears more reasonable based upon what the designation is in the land use plan. And again, this is a regional activity center. That's the largest activity center that the town has in terms of level of intensity. And finally, the last point I want to mention to you, and then I'll stop talking and turn it over to the folks in the public. I think what you're going to hear tonight is you're going to hear folks who are concerned about the impact of this case on their lives, and I get that, and we're sympathetic to it. And we have been conducting a multitude of tests to try to understand what the overall impact of this site as a whole is going to have on folks in the community. But you're also going to hear that there is support in the community. There's support from people who live in these neighborhoods, who understand that living within proximity to a failing shopping center is not good for them. They want the shopping center to be better. The town wants the shopping center to be better. The owners of the shopping center want it to be better. And we believe wholeheartedly that this is step one to making it a better place to shop and a better place to visit. So with that, we are here. I'm here with representatives of CBL to answer any questions that you all may have, and we respectfully request you all support of the rezoning application. Thank you.
Thank you. And now for those of you who wish to participate in the public hearing for this case, you may do so.
Hi. Good evening.
Would you mind going
Over
to the
here?
other?
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm going to make this very simple. I would like to represent 5 other homes in addition to me and my husband. My name is Hedda Bagnall Jennings. I live at 1040 Ivy Lane for 42 years now, before there was ever a mall. So my backyard backs right up to the property line where this facility will be existing. And if I could ask for Ann Mickey, who resides at 1138, if she could stand. Eleanor Smith at 1034 Ivy Lane. Danny and Kathy Riggs at 1044. Don and Joe Hudson at 1039. And Howard Hollis and his wife at 1046. And all of these back up to the property line, excepting for Don and Joe Hudson. He is right across the street, and a lot of them have been longtime residents. So it's kind of ironic. We're not allowed to talk about something that we really know is coming or could come. So my backyard runs right up against this Convention Drive loop in the Sears parking lot. This would allow a tall building that will impact my life, my home, my property. I'm not allowed to talk about anything else regarding this. We would prefer that a different solution to providing an attractive tenant in the Sears building be pursued. The current size of the mall is tolerable with the existing buffer. As the gentleman just indicated, the current buffer does a good job protecting us, but that's not going to change when the height limit is raised to 3-story. And once you do it for one building, that can open up a Pandora box for the rest of the mall all the way across, and we have no idea what will be coming and impacting us in the future. So the quality of life in our neighborhood, our backyards, and an existing Triangle Aquatic Center nonprofit business is going to be impacted by some of your decisions. So we would request that you would defeat the rezoning position. All of the things that have been mentioned in the protest petitions, we can't talk about, but we are very strongly opposing it. We understand the mall needs help, but we do not believe that this large facility is going to be the savior of the Cary Town Center. We've heard from experts that have done studies on all these different situations. Why would we even want to believe them? They're being paid to represent someone that is trying to salvage the mall. I understand that, but we need to be smart and not try to stuff a huge facility in the back corner that's going to be shoved up against us and impact a lot of people. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you. And I would point out that all the individuals she mentioned did in fact stand up for those who couldn't see it on TV. Thank you, ma'am.
Hello, I'm Eric Rosch, R-A-A-S-C-H. Sorry, it's a habit. I am one of the grassroots leaders of Cary Forward, which is a coalition of supporters for the rezoning. As of 5 minutes ago, we had 538 signatures on our petition in support of the rezoning. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of my personal reasons why I'm interested in this project. Of course, I'm a Cary citizen, and I'm an avid mall shopper. I've actually been to the mall recently. I even drove there today. I am really concerned about the mall and its changes over the past several years. I have experience with being around struggling malls. I used to live in North Durham, and it can be a very unpopular place, and sometimes struggling malls could be an unsafe place. I am a father, a proud parent of a third grader at Adams Elementary, right across the street from Cary Town Center. And based on where I live, off Kildare Farm, my daughter should be in school in all 3 schools adjacent to the property for her career, if we play our cards right. And so I do have a worry about the growing number of vacant buildings. There are already several, now quite large buildings, and unattended buildings, and buildings that are not thriving, falling into disrepair, and also putting safety at some degree of risk. I know that the Cary juniors and seniors at Cary High, some of them have lunch passes, so they're free to go to lunch. So if there's less presence of an active community, I worry that the environment as a whole, for them, as well as for any students that might be walking to their various schools, could be altered in a negative way. Additionally, as the mall changes, so does the amount of jobs in the mall. The amount of economic impact is a growing one that I believe could truly be negative. But if we can make changes and improve the mall, revitalize it, then the hope is that more jobs would come, both permanent jobs and some really great part-time jobs for our young adults who need to learn life lessons and have a little spending money as well. So I'd really like to see the mall revitalized. And for the purpose of this hearing, the main question, it turns out, when we translate from stories to feet and putting actually more discrete restrictions on the zoning, we notice that the tallest point of Dillard's is 54 feet. So it's a question of 6 feet. Sad to say I'm not 6 feet tall, but perhaps the top of my hair is close to 6 feet. So that's the real difference we're looking at. And I think it's a difference worth considering for the large upside that I believe there to be moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
My name is Anthony Segretti. I've lived in Cary since 1979, and in the subdivision immediately adjoining Cary Town Center since 1983. I'm speaking today in support of the zoning change for Cary Town Center. In recent years, Cary Town Center has not thrived as it has in the past. A number of buildings have been vacant for extended periods of time, and some have been razed. The former Harris Teeter location has been vacant since the summer of 2014, and the former Sears property has been vacant since the beginning of this year. The retail landscape is changing quickly, both because of competition from newer malls such as South Point and virtual competitors like Amazon. Will this zoning change be sufficient to enable Cary Town Center to thrive as it has in the past? I hope so, but I don't know for sure. I'm certainly not an expert in commercial real estate. What I do know is that Cary Town Center has been a good neighbor to our subdivision, and that the mall owners feel that the zoning change will enhance the opportunity for Cary Town Center to flourish once more. I am also certain that a healthy Cary Town Center is important for the town of Cary and for our neighborhood. In today's dynamic marketplace, change is inevitable. I would much prefer to see a modest zoning change that would enable Cary Town Center to compete effectively rather than an alternative increase in the number of vacant properties on this site. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Jamie Schwadler, and I'm with Parker, Poe, Adams, and Bernstein at 301 Fayetteville Street in Raleigh. I'm here tonight to make a few points on behalf of Triangle Aquatic Center, otherwise known as TAC, which happens to own the parcel that's immediately to the northwest. It's on your diagram there, the rather large parcel in the northeast corner, excuse me. It also happens to be the parcel where this height request is concentrated. The height request is made specifically within that parcel, that area of the mall that's 1,000 feet within the TAC parcel. And you see on your diagram that the 250 feet setback applies to Ivy Meadows. It does not apply to the Triangle Aquatic Center. So this 60-foot impact would be right in our front yard. And Triangle Aquatic Center realizes that the eventual redevelopment of this mall is inevitable. It's good for the town. It's good for the citizens. It would be good for TAC and would be good for the property owners if it was done in a holistic way that incorporated all of the ideals that Cary holds dear to it in its planning principles. Ideals that allow for circulation within a site, that allow for proper traffic to deal with the impacts of a development, that allow for the concentration of heights to be adjacent to major thoroughfares such as Maynard and Carytown Boulevard, and allow for appropriate transitions between those concentrated areas that can handle the height, that can handle that intense use of the density, and then steps down as it gets towards places like neighborhood property lines or adjacent areas that have high volumes of families and children that are using a facility on a daily, weekly basis throughout the year. And Triangle Aquatic Center wants to be a partner in the redevelopment of the mall. They want to see a place that's vibrant, just like Mr. Barron mentioned, a South Point or a North Hills. All of those things are possible. But the rezoning that's on the table now is not what you saw at North Hills. It's not what you saw at South Point. Those had large canvases which allowed for a comprehensive plan and incorporated all those ideas of the stakeholders to provide for circulation, to reduce the traffic impacts, to make sure that the holistic plan was done in a comprehensive way and not in a piecemeal way. They didn't come in and develop one parcel at a time. And so these concerns are troubling to TAC because we hold over 30 swim meets a year. They support over 400,000 visitors to TAC on an annual basis. Those visitors park in the TAC facility. They come across to the mall and patron the mall, and it increases the TAC space and the the economic incentives of the town. Now, when TAC was developed in 2007, as part of the town's approval, there was a shared parking agreement that allowed 68 spaces from the mall parking lot in the area that's proposed for the rezoning now to be used by TAC patrons to support those swim meets so that children and their families could have a safe place to park and walk over to the TAC parcel. Because the rezoning is targeted in that area, CBL, the applicant, has met with TAC to talk about where those places going to go. And unfortunately, at this point in time, we haven't been able to get to a place where we have a written agreement saying, this is where our patrons are going to be going, this is how far they're going to be walking to the site, this is the impact when you take a circulation road away from the edge of the site. So our concerns still remain. We're still hoping to work those out. We're still wanting to be a partner with CBL and getting those concerns resolved. But as the rezoning stands, we don't believe it fulfills the three of the 6 conditions that the applicant is required to show. First, it's inconsistent with the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan indicates that those transition principles should happen. So as you go from the higher use area of Maynard Road and transition down to a less intensive use of your neighborhood property, there should be a decrease in height, not an increase. If there's an increase considered, widen it on the whole parcel so that the entire parcel can have the benefit of redevelopment. Excuse me. And second, factor number 5, the proposed rezoning will have a significant adverse impact on other properties in the area. In addition to some of the neighbors that might be speaking tonight, TAC has a little bit of a different issue. There is no buffer, there is no setback along the TAC border, and TAC is actually in a decreased elevation, so that the 60-foot right up along the property line diminishes its visibility, it diminishes accessibility, and it diminishes its ingress and egress. There's no condition right now that would require a circulation road or require some sort of setback, and so we would say that those would fail to meet those. And finally, the proposed zoning classification just isn't appropriate. It should be done not in a piecemeal way. So we would ask respectfully that you inform the town council or recommend that they deny the request. And if you're inclined to approve it, we would ask for 3 additional conditions: that the circulation road be met, excuse me, that the 250 setback be added to the property line, and that the 60-foot limitation be included for all structures and not just buildings. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Mike Kern, and I chair the board of the nonprofit Triangle Aquatic Center. Our legal counsel spoke about some of the technical stuff for you, but I want to spend just a few minutes talking about the human side of this issue. First, I'd like to share with you some of the benefits of the Triangle Aquatic Center to Cary citizens and aquatic organizations. I do want to express some disappointment with working with CBL since we've been a partner with them for 8 years and really have not made any progress in trying to work something that would be a win-win-win for everybody. And I want to state that we fully support the development of Cary, the growth of Cary, and the Cary Town Center, for the next generation. First on TAC, in order to help meet the public need for aquatic facilities, Cary citizens, Triangle citizens got together 8 years ago, and they built the facility without any tax funding or subsidies, something that is very, very difficult to do today. And the purpose for that was to provide a facility for the community that they could benefit significantly from. TAC is a nonprofit, and it's public. Anybody can use it, and there's no membership requirements at all. Drowning is the 2nd leading cause of accidental death of children 14 and under. And TAC provides the largest Learn to Swim program in the Triangle, and one of the largest Make a Splash programs in the country that provides free swim lessons to financially disadvantaged children. Likewise, TAC has become a destination venue for local, state, regional, and even national aquatic events that drives more than $5 million of economic benefit into Wake County, which also benefits Cary. TAC offers lane space and programming to some of our most valuable community programs. All of the Wake County public high schools, several private high schools, including Cardinal Gibbons, Cary Academy, Grace Christian, the Homeschool Network. We host the Special Olympics. We host the North Carolina Senior Games, and we provide programming for the YMCA, the Boy Scouts, and the USA swim teams here in the area. The rezoning and planned facility, if built in the proposed location will simply drown TAC. We will not be able to continue the way we are today. Second, TAC has had a successful partnership with CBL Properties for the last 8 years, and it's benefited the town, it's benefited the community, it's benefited CBL, and it's definitely benefited TAC. The shared parking agreement that was talked about allows us to be this destination venue that drives the $5 million in here. And it also allows us to have more than 10,000 of people go to the mall and shop and eat, which has been a direct benefit to the mall. And it has allowed TAC, quite frankly, to remain financially viable. We have to raise almost $800,000 a year in donations and fundraising just to keep TAC open, because we have no tax funding. So everything that hurts TAC hurts our ability to continue to remain viable. CBL wants to force a very large facility close to the Ivy Lane neighborhood as possible and directly in front of TAC. And as designed, it cuts off that road access from the Macy's store to us. It's cutting off so there's only one way in and one way out of TAC. That we have police, we've had ambulances, we have fire that have come to TAC over the last 8 years, and it's a significant safety hazard to have only one access in and out. And with 420,000 visits there, combined with whatever other facility is going to be built there and bring, it will simply be, a parking and driving nightmare. We feel that the rezoning, as it is right now, will hurt TAC in multiple ways, particularly putting a large facility right in front of TAC, cutting it off. I will say we want to work with CBL. We believe that the mall needs to be redeveloped. What we just can't have is this facility pushed in us with absolutely no flexibility and no communication, and this parking kind of shut off. So I'd ask you tonight, please do not vote to drown TAC. If you feel like the rezoning needs to go through, there are 3 things that are really important to us. The first is we'd like the same 250-foot buffer that Ivy Lane has. Today, we don't have that buffer at all, so it'd be literally right in front of us. We'd like you to limit the height to structures at the same height of the building. And finally, we'd like an absolute requirement to keep that road perimeter going all the way around so you have in and out access, as opposed to being cut off right now. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Bill Rogers. I was born in Cary in 1935. It's just the second time I've ever been to a formal meeting over in the town hall. But I wanted to come tonight. I live on 1112 Ralph Drive, and right behind me is the United Methodist Church, and there's a 60-foot building there where the church had built it since I bought my house there 45 years ago. It has never been any problem with me. There's a road that runs right 10 foot from my property line at the back, and they even have a dumpster there that has to be emptied twice a week, and I hear the noise sometime at 5 o'clock in the morning. But I'm willing for this. I want this to happen, and I love it being there. The whole thing is great because that's where young people and older people come for fellowship, for lots of good purposes. Boy Scouts have all kind of meetings, and they even had, just a week ago, they had a 50s night and played some real nice music and sold old milkshakes and hamburgers. So I know what it's like to have a neighbor behind you where I can't see above the building, but I planted some beautiful Leland cypress plants there when they started their building, and they have now grown just about as tall as the building. So what I'm here for tonight is I just feel like that I know that online retail sales last year probably increased somewhere around about 15% the last time I heard, and same little store sales just barely broke even. And I know when I go up to the mall and walk around, I see all those vacant spaces in there, and we do a lot of walking there, but to be honest, my wife does all of her shopping now. She pulls up the computer. She used to go to the mall twice a week. Now every day she's on the computer shopping. So I think that this is just a change that is coming about, and we're seeing it now with people much younger than I am, but then as time goes on and everybody gets to starts using computers, that I think that that's going to be just the overwhelming main way that people spend their money to shop. So I think that the mall, we loved it. I remember, when it was built, because there were people that opposed it then, just like there's always going to be people that have opposed everything that has ever been done in Cary in my lifetime. I don't know of anything that was ever done. Even when they built the library, there were people that were opposed to building that. So that's just part of it. But I think that the mall has served a great purpose, during this time that it's been there. But I can see now that the change is needed, and that people now are going more for places where there are restaurants. You can tell that if you went out to eat this weekend, you probably had to wait a long time no matter where you went to get a table. People going for recreation. And I just think that the mall has got to change along with the times. And I hope that you'll see fit to let them get the zoning done so that they can make this change. And I really don't believe that in the long run it's going to affect anybody that much in a negative way. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Karen Michener, and I am living on 1204 Lyerly Lane, which is right off of Ivy Lane, and I want to say I oppose the rezoning change. We live at one of the highest peaks of the neighborhood and can clearly see the lights shining at night from the mall today. Allowing a 60-foot change to the zoning will be more visible from our home, and if we wanted to see large buildings intruding into our neighborhood, we would have moved to the city, such as Raleigh or Durham. When the balloon test was done, it did show that the balloons do in fact come through at times. And the irony of this is that it was done while all the trees were full of foliage. And in the fall, it will be a different story. With this fact in mind, if the zoning changes do go through, we would hope you would consider to change the buffer from 250 to 300 feet. If you are increasing the size of the structures for the mall area, it should increase everything across the board. This would include the buildings and any structures associated with that, be it fencing, poles, lighting, signage, etc. We do not want to create the beginning of urban sprawl reflecting the larger cities surrounding us to start moving in this direction. Walnut Street is the gateway to downtown Cary, and rezoning would tip the balance, compromising our way of life for big businesses and open the door to the development of high-rises encroaching upon our neighborhood. Having this impression is not what we want and need. The current zoning laws were done precisely for preservation and protection of all our natural resources, and to not make Cary other than what it already is, a town that strives to preserve and protect its homes, its beautiful parks and greenways, and a community that balances residential life for us to raise our families and to work in harmony with the businesses. Increasing building height will escalate the traffic concerns that we already have in our neighborhood. We're sandwiched between two major shopping centers, and adding more traffic will be compounding that hardship. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Alex Withers, resident of Cary. I've been living here over 4 years. Wife and 2 small children, love living in Cary, and I have to say it's the first public hearing I've been to. I think it's wonderful that you guys give us a chance to have our opinions and says on this, and appreciate all the diverse inputs we've had already. I'm certainly a fan of the plans. I think that change, whenever change happens, change is never easy. I think when I first read about the plans, there was concerns, is it going to be 6 stories, 7 stories? Is it going to be as tall as the Renaissance in North Hills? I think when I found that it was only 3, that could be covered and concealed by a lot of foliage and buffers, it suddenly became a very real option in my mind and our family's mind. I think that any opportunity to reinvigorate Cary Town from the inside out rather than from the outside and have people leave the center of town and start heading out to new malls around 540, I think it's a great opportunity to bring more vibrancy and community and family engagement into the center of town, the Cary Town again. Any activities or plans, and I think things like the Aquatic Center are wonderful, that bring families together, that allow families to interact with one another in outdoor pursuits versus being buried in video games, stuck in rooms, I think is a terrific idea for our town, and I'm a huge supporter of the rezoning. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, members of the board, for the opportunity to do this. Thank you for your service. I want to encourage you to think about always doing everything that you can to encourage creativity, maybe even inspire creativity in any decision that you make.
May I interrupt you and ask you your name, please?
Certainly. My apologies. My name is Eugene Lee from Blackfriars Loop in Cary. I made a very good choice about 30 years ago where to bring my toddlers. I had 3 opportunities in wonderful communities. But when I did the research and examined the Census Bureau and what it said about the Triangle area of North Carolina, I said to my wife, that's probably where we ought to go. And we did. Boy, did we make the right decision. When I got off the plane, there were 6 million people in this state. Not too distant future, we're going to be at 10, if the forecast is correct. Everything that we have seen has been amazing in the diversity of people, ideas, communities. It has been a wonderful place to raise toddlers. Now the grandchildren are part and parcel of the Triangle area. It's been wonderful. It will continue to be wonderful, I'm sure. Whatever you do, encourage and foster and inspire ideas and creativity so that that generation, my toddlers back then in '85, I call them the Nintendo generation. They are doing amazing things in medicine, in research, in teaching. They are the ones with the new ideas and new ways to think and act and to play and to entertain and to build community. Continue to think of how you do more of that to encourage that generation and the generations to come. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good evening. Came here to kind of spur the moment. I'm here to speak for the zoning. That listening to what was said previously, with a 54-foot Dillard's, basically you're talking about 6 feet now, not 60 feet. And also listening to a 2-story regulations, that could be 80 feet. So they're trying to pinpoint this down. And I've been to the mall. I moved up here to be near my grandchildren. And I like to take my grandchildren to that mall, especially we go there during bad weather and they love to shop and run around and do things with a little train and everything else there. And mall dying is not a good thing. I was in law enforcement for 30 years, 20 years with county, 10 years with the state. And I've seen what happens when malls die, when they lose one tenant. It's not good for the neighborhood. Usually if one tenant goes, like a major tenant, things follow. The small ones go and the bigger ones go and the area dies. And it's not good for many things. It's not good for crime. It's not good for the community, not good for property values. 60-foot variances, they're talking because of 3 stories. They could actually build 60, 70 feet now under 2 stories. And since Dillard's is already 54 feet, we're talking 6 feet. And to keep a mall viable is very good. As he said, you have Crabtree Mall. Look what happened, North Hills. That place is always crowded. Cary Town Center, not so. You go in there at times, and there's almost no one in there. To bring people back is a great thing. To bring revenue into the city helps, is a good thing. To not let the mall die is a good thing. To have somebody who seems like going to be a good tenant and a viable tenant can only help this area. There's nothing to hurt it at all. They could build now and build taller than what they're asking for without the variance. So now they're just, of course, they're talking about 2 stories or 3 stories. The 2 stories could always go to 70 feet, 75 feet. But they just, of course, they're doing 3 stories. And as I said, they have 54 feet right now building in the mall. So we're talking 6 feet difference. And to trying to keep a mall viable is extremely important. You don't want the place to die. You don't want to start losing tenants. You lose the revenue income from that. It does not help. And once tenants from the mall go, the surrounding area, the tenants start going. As the Harris Teeter's gone now, moved just down the street, but you want tenants to occupy these buildings. But if the mall dies and it doesn't get the people coming in, you won't be able to fill these up. To keep it viable, you need anchor tenants, and without anchor tenants, it doesn't happen. I've seen home malls die, and literally new malls die. There's one in Nashville, Tennessee called the Bellevue Mall, lost a main tenant, and the whole mall died just from that, and we don't want to see that here. And I'm, again, speaking for this. I think it'd be a great thing for the town to keep this mall going and hopefully to revitalize it and fill up all the empty spaces, and hopefully the area surrounding it too. Thank you.
Sir, may we have your name before you leave?
Excuse me?
May we have your name, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. Andrew Gluck, G-L-U-C-K.
Thanks, sir. It certainly makes things easier for us if you start with your name.
Good evening. My name is Kirsten Nicholas. I'm here tonight in support of the rezoning initiative. I've been a Cary resident for 9 years, and I've watched the development of Cary very carefully since I've moved here. I admit that some of the changes I have not agreed with, and some of them I have been in support of. Prior to living in Cary, I lived in a unique area of Alexandria, Virginia called Kingstown. Kingstown, similar to Cary, was different than some of the neighboring towns and neighborhoods. It was a work, live, play kind of opportunity in Kingstown. It was a fresh development inside of an old city. Similar to the rezoning meeting we're having tonight, the city of Alexandria had one very, very similar in Kingstown for the exact same type of business that has petitioned this to begin with. The rezoning initiative passed in Kingstown, and the building was built. As a result, it allowed my family to be more active, and I do want to mention I lived directly across the street from the building. There was no buffer, no trees, no wall. The initiative for the rezoning allowed my family to be more active. It allowed me to take out-of-town family members and guests, and allowed me to have business meetings at the facility. All of those things, I believe, were able to bring economic growth and continued stability to my little area. The business was constantly packed. Business people had meetings there during the day. High school students went in the evenings to practice, and then normal people like me just like to go and have a good time. As you know, not everybody in Cary belongs to a gym or a swim club or a golf country club membership. And so for this rezoning, it would allow the opportunity for additional opportunities of activities for normal individuals like myself. I would like to share one additional story. Before I lived in Kingstown, I grew up in San Mateo. It's a large city in the San Francisco Bay Area. In San Mateo, growing up in the 1980s, there was a mall. It was called Fashion Island. Fashion Island initially was the hub of everything. It had an ice rink, a movie theater, a large arcade, and every store that you could imagine. Very similar to Cary Town Center, with the exception of the ice rink and the movie theater. Over the years, people stopped visiting the stores because they wanted a different experience. Newer things popped up that were a little more flashy and a little more trendy. One by one, the stores left the mall, and at the end, the ice rink was the only major attraction left. Eventually, the city decided they needed to bring new life to the area. They completely ripped down the mall except for one thing, the ice rink. It was quite a sight. You drive along and here's this giant hole with an ice rink. They built a more modern layout with the work, live, play philosophy, and now that exact same piece of land is an economic hub for the city. The shops and restaurants are booming, and the rink is still the best training area around. I can definitely see this type of revitalization happening in our current Cary Town Center without having to rip down the entire structure. I think that the rezoning would allow the Cary Town Center to rebrand itself and create a destination location that doesn't exist anywhere else in our community or anywhere else in the Triangle. I admit I don't visit Cary Town Center very often, but I tell you without a doubt, when my kids were younger and they wanted to ride the carousel, I would go almost every other day. And without a doubt, every other day I ended up buying something. It's my hope that if we're able to rezone, that we'll be able to also invite additional people to visit with the support of the TAC facility and the support of the new facilities that are there based on the rezoning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, members of the Zoning Board. My name is Crystal Rogers, and I live in the Walnut Hills subdivision. I'm here this evening with my husband, Michael, and my mother, Claudia, and we wholeheartedly support the rezoning of Cary Town Mall. The request, like the gentleman said earlier, is only 6 feet. We support anything and everything that will provide Cary Town Center with the much-needed push that it needs to continue. I grew up in South Florida. I'm Hollywood, Florida, to be exact, and I've seen many malls completely die. I've seen many neighborhoods where the property values plummet, crime increased. It was a horrible situation. I wouldn't wish that on any state, in any town, anywhere in this country. I certainly would not like to see my backyard, well, technically a front yard mall, have that happen to it. So I implore you to please give this every opportunity and to pass the zoning. And I want to see Cary, not only Cary succeed, but the mall succeed, bring more jobs to the community, bring more, not just for the economical part of it, but for the commercial part of it, and really put Cary on the map like it deserves to be. We're very fortunate that this didn't go to Raleigh or Charlotte, and I really don't want to see this opportunity get passed up. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for your service. Appreciate it.
Good evening. My name is Gerald Jarrett, and I'm here, live in Cary. I've lived here 18 years and have grown to like it. My wife drugged me to Cary. I came kicking and screaming, but once here, I love it. I've raised my kids here. I recognize both sides. I'm an educator, higher education. I teach in the college level. And I recognize the importance of socialization and opportunity for people to get together, whether it's recreation or whatever. And I understand how neighborhoods are fearful of impact of change. But change comes. I heard someone talk about urban sprawl. Urban sprawl is what we see when we keep building these one-story malls that stretch and pave over the forest. This is not urban sprawl. This going, the way to go if you're going to build is up, not out. But I'm also a golfer. And if I could spend every day, that's what I do. I go to that mall on a regular basis. I've watched it when I first came, growing, thriving. I've watched it go down, the loss of stores. You go there now, and it seems like it's the destination for senior citizens. Now, not to knock senior citizens, I'm 68 years old. So I'm in that same group. But there needs to be an attraction. When you put Dave and Buster's in there, it brought youth in, brought more people in. Bringing in this particular facility will benefit economically as well. We need jobs. We can't turn our back and not have jobs. This will bring jobs and opportunity, as someone said, for young folks who need part-time jobs, and for older folks who need full-time jobs, and for senior citizens who just need a part-time, something to keep busy. But 6 foot is not much. It's not going to make or break a neighborhood. And from the description, the balloon test, you really didn't see it. I think that allowing this facility to go in will attract more customers back to the mall instead of them going other locations. Thank you.
Thank you.
How are you guys doing this evening? My name is Samuel Diaz. I'm a member of Cary Forward, also manage a store in the center itself. I myself have my wife and 2 daughters to support. I've been in this location since August, but I've shopped in the center when I moved into North Carolina. This mall used to be a grade A mall, and it's now a grade C mall. For me, I'm into business. And I want to be like Crabtree and South Point Mall. I want people to talk about Cary Town Center Mall. Now people say, I'd rather go to South Point or Crabtree because Cary Town Center doesn't have anything to offer, or is dying down. I believe the rezoning, the individuals handling the rezoning have huge success in their work. The height rezoning itself means more to me than a place just to relax and hit a few golf balls. This venue will help provide stability and security to my career, help my kids have a roof over their head and some food on the table. Because believe it or not, the location that I manage depends on the future of Cary Town Center. We're on a short lease waiting on what will happen to the mall. And I need my job. I enjoy coming to work every day. I love talking about Cary, since it's the 3rd best city in the world. Amen to that. And I think, some of these life changes could happen. And us as adults, human beings, we deal with the life changes. We deal with traffic every day during rush hour. We tend to deal with it. I think if we just put a little bit of time and thought to it, it'll be for the better future of Cary Town Center and the city of Cary. And I am in support of this rezoning. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you for taking the time to hear from us this evening. My name is John Sorrell. I'm one of the property owners that backs up directly to Cary Town Center on Ivy Lane. I've lived there about 2 years now. I've really enjoyed it. It's a great neighborhood. And I've got to give kudos to CBL. Their development team has reached out to us on a number of occasions and has been very forthcoming with what is planned both at the rezoning phase and what's planned later on through special use permit. I do have a number of concerns about the proposed rezoning and the proposed development. If you notice how the proposed rezoning is targeted in this back corner of the property, it's very apparent that it's targeted for a specific use. That's to come in this location. I don't believe that it's a great transition between the existing use and the existing residential development to go higher as you approach the existing. As they have brought us information about what's planned, we've heard a vastly different height number than the 60 foot. And I'd like to tell you today, I agree, the existing screening is probably sufficient for 60 foot. But you've heard two other people this evening mention limiting the height of structures on the property to this same 60 feet. I think that if you asked for that condition, it would be very telling as to the games that are being played with the proposed height out here. We currently have a height restriction for building, which to me means that nothing should be built on this property greater than 60 feet tall. That was my understanding when I purchased my property. I work in the development community. I did my research, and I saw that the property behind me could build no taller than 60 feet. So I'd ask you to ask for that condition and ask for the height restriction to be limited to 60 feet and see how far that goes. Thank you for your help.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Donald Kalinowski. Live on 944 Ivy Lane with my wife and son, dog and cat. And that's part of my thing. Today I walked the dog before I came out here. I could hear birds, watch the squirrels play. At night, we can hear the peepers down in the stream behind the building, behind the aquatic center. We're convenient, but we have a lifestyle there. And what I want to talk tonight, the other people here have eloquently explained a lot of the factors. Let's talk about the animal in the room here. It's an elephant. But right now, the trunk is the only thing we see. It's sticking underneath the wall of the tent. If you pass this, you're going to have to discuss other factors, that four-letter word that begins with G that we can't talk about. I'm concerned that it's a creep. Okay, they get to 60 feet. But like they said, the structures, the lighting, the music, which we can't talk about tonight. That's the feet, the tail, the ears of the elephant. We also see that this structure will be the Messiah. It will save them all. Unless Penny's moves out, Macy's collapses, or whatever else happens. But it's the Messiah. It will give us jobs, fight off crime, and so forth. I don't believe that's a real factor. It'll give jobs to youth. But wait a minute, it's going to be open till 1 o'clock in the morning serving alcohol? Ask yourself this. Would you want this adjoining your backyard? Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
How y'all doing? I'm Paul Costin. I live on Ivy Lane, been there since 1987. Coming from a small town in Ohio, about 18,000, went to Texas, played baseball, did all that, 1.2 million, decided to move here. I'm in construction remodeling, so I know rezoning, variances, all that stuff you guys go through, it's been controlled, okay? You've done a good job of it. But what we don't want is something that just needs to be fit in place because they need somebody in here to bring some revenue in. You've controlled everything around here. The council's done it. Everything's great. Height restrictions, all that stuff, okay? What we don't want is, as the other one said, the certain height limits. Now, I'm gonna go to a couple things that when we met the council 6-8 weeks back, they told us to go and talk to the CDL, which is what we did, okay? Had a couple questions for Mr. Barron over there, and he's, CDL's great. We need to make this better, understandable, but we got to control it. We got to control the height limits. We got to control what's in here, okay? One of my questions were to Mr. Barron was about the balloon tests that were requested. He said he's taking care of it, which they did. If you go back to the recording of the council meeting, the mayor asked 2 most outer points. When I questioned Mr. Barron on that, he says that's not needed, they want building heights. Well, if the mayor asked you the 2 most outer points, aren't you supposed to be doing that? So what's being hid from the plans? What aren't they showing? His response was, I'll show it if we pass zoning, okay? Things need to happen here. I've been back there a long time. High House Road was 2 lanes. You saw what you did to Preston. I mean, some of you have been on the board a long time, some are new, some are learning. That's all part of it. The other night, we got home from out of town, let's go to eat. Didn't want to go to Crossroads, because it's, you know, it's a mess down there. I'm down there every day. So we went out to Preston. We went down to Cary and 54, that shopping center with the Target back there, and went to eat. Okay, you got movie theaters, you got restaurants in there, you got small stores in there. You can go down to High House and Davis, back there, which Tribeca is and all that back there. That's been developed well with townhomes, 2 stories, very nice, always crowded. Having a facility that's going to take up the majority of this is pretty much the wrong issue to put into this. It's just not going to work, okay? You need to control it. Cary's been controlled. I've been around it all. I've done the building here. Believe me, you guys take care of it. It needs to be done that way. Efficiently, we need to be better for what's going in there. CDL needs to make money, we understand that. But they've got to have options, not just the first one that comes up to us and say, hey, we want to stick this in here. There's got to be options. We just ask you to work with us on this. We live back there, okay? I don't want something that's going to be as wide as a football field and half the football field tall in my backyard. I don't think you would either, okay? Height restrictions from 54 to 60 feet, I'm 6'2", so that's what you add, okay? Not a lot, but what you put in there is what's going to matter, okay? It's not about big giant facilities. Put sports facilities in there, okay? We started playing tennis after 30 years, now the kids are gone. It's nice to hit the ball. Can't chase them like I used to. We go over to the courts over there on Walnut Street, and they're filled up. Sears is an ideal location to put some kind of soccer event in there, like you have the soccer domes. Things like that need to be thought of. Why couldn't you do tennis courts? They got them on the other side of town. They bring them in. There's a lot of things that can go into this. You got soccer park there, okay? You got the high schools. This area is very big in sports, okay? So other than that, you can put things in there that'll work, that are low profile, but it's gonna help the community. You got the aquatic center there. You've heard about that. Putting a huge facility in here is just not gonna get it. And think about it if it's your backyard. Now, we're for something happening. Other people are for wanting this in here. Well, it's not in your backyard. And I'm glad to make Cary better, but if it's in your backyard, you gotta think about it. Not from the other side of town. I have no problem with what's gonna go somewhere around this area, just what's going in this location. So what has been done over the last 28 years I've been here, it's been done well. And you need to keep continuing doing that well. Think about us, not about the big business. The mall's gonna survive. They can get other clients in here. This is just one that happened to pop into it. And it's all because Sears went to bankruptcy, not because they had to leave. You all probably know that by reading the paper. So, you know, I just hope you take in consideration what goes in there. And the 2 most outer points for balloon tests are supposed to be there, and they're not because it's not needed, but it was requested to be done only if they pass their zoning. Those were the words that were given to me from Mr. Barron at that meeting. Only if we pass zoning. So you pass zoning, now you're gonna get into what's next, what's gonna be hidden. Bring it on the table, put it all out. That's all we're asking. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Evening, Board. My name is Matt Taggart. I live at 1132 Ivy Lane, right near that little dog leg that comes down. I'm hearing a lot of supporters of this rezoning sell 6 feet as a panacea for revitalizing the mall. Mr. Barron described the rezoning as having the potential to initiate a rebirth. I think to do that, we would need more than 6 feet and a comprehensive plan for the entire mall. If you look at this site plan and ask yourself, where would I put the tallest structure on this site? Would it be in this position, in the shaded green, right next to a residential zone? Probably not. I'm imagining you would put it next to the busiest road front up in the northwest corner. So I think one recommendation would be a comprehensive plan for the entire site rather than this small rezoning to potentially accommodate a special use. One other request I'd like to suggest is to, and this has been requested before, but I don't think it can be understated, is to limit the height of all structures, not just buildings on the site, to 60 feet. I do have to give CBL kudos for reaching out to the homeowners. They are doing a good job in maintaining a line of communication. Regarding the vegetative buffer, the fence, and the vegetation planted there, the buffer performs pretty well as it is for the current height of 54 feet. But as you start to see building height increase, I think it could be improved. One of these ways is replacing the Leland cypress sitting on top of the buffer. I'd enter that zone to pick up garbage that blows over from the parking lot, and the support materials that were put on the trees are, when they were planted, are strangling the trees, so their life is limited at this point. So a request might be that those are replaced or maintained if they're have a limited life left. The shade box fence is approximately 8 feet tall. I think it would be a fair compromise to request an increase in the height of that fence to accommodate for the potential increase in building height. And also possibly a change in the building materials rather than the shade box, which allows some light and sound to go through, possibly a masonry fence. Regarding the balloon test, I think it should have been conducted at a time at which a height increase would have the most impact on a neighbor. And by that, I mean the balloon test should have been conducted when the leaves are off the trees. In that buffer, the majority of vegetation is deciduous, so you have no leaves there in the winter and early spring. So I would have liked to see the balloon test conducted then, so we could get a better idea of the effect of the height increase on our sight lines. I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Michelle Muir, and I'm here as a neighbor. I am a former member of this board, and thank you very much for serving. I'm not here in any role that I currently hold, so let me be clear about that. I'm not speaking for any other organization or entity. So, but I do speak as a neighbor because this is my neighborhood. We moved in 1998 to Askham Drive at Lane, which is on the map that you've got right there in Walnut Hills. Popped out of the house with the fourth kid and moved across the street. So, so this has been home for 17 years. I have walked around this mall and in this mall, miles and miles and miles of exercising. I drop the kids off at the high school and then turn right back around, and the whole mall is in my view. So, so that is the prettiest morning at about 7:15 that you can have at Maynard and Walnut Street. And I have watched over the 17 years as it goes from thriving, interesting, vibrant center to dead spot which puts up Velvet Elvises in the parking lot to make $1. And that's not where any of us want to be. So I want to speak, even though I don't speak from any board that I currently serve on, I will say that that has given me some experience that lets me look at this kind of differently than I did when or would have 17 years ago when I first got here. So I want to speak specifically to this issue about the height, because that's really what you have before you here. The use, the parking, the circulation, whether it's walkable from the high school for jobs, those are really not germane to what you're looking at tonight. You're looking at the height and the fence. So So as far as the height goes, I will tell you that revitalization is coming to this mall. This is not the key to it, but this is a big piece to it and to this area. And this parcel, the parcel that is in the north, it was, for Wayne will remember, from REZ 12 REZ 10, there is a 128-unit retirement center going in that parcel. That building, that rezoning was approved for 4 stories, okay? So the 60 feet is the transition. They're absolutely correct that your higher building should be over by those corners and against your major roadways. This becomes the transition. If you want a holistic North Hills hotel, vibrant redevelopment happening there, this is the edge of that, and it goes up from there. It's not the peak and then back down. So, so just about that transition, moving, whatever you do, if you move from 2 stories to 60 feet, you're removing what I would consider an arbitrary standard. Whatever foot value you put on it, put a foot value on it so that people who want to develop and who want to build have the ability to do that to a number instead of a vague concept that says, well, 2 stories here looks like one thing and 3 stories there looks like another thing. And as far as the fence goes, the fence absolutely does need to be replaced. I can absolutely, when I studied the staff report, looked at the balloon test, I can totally understand this idea about the foliage and it was obscuring and all of that, but we know what the development process looks like. We know it's a very long process, and they weren't required to do a balloon test by law. That's not part of the ordinances. That was a request of the mayor that was made at a certain time, and in order for everything to keep going down the process, that test had to happen then, as opposed to putting it all back 9 months later. So, so those are my only comments. I do think this is going to be not the horrible impact, awful thing that people are concerned that it's going to be, to change the height here and to add the fence. And the fence is certainly going to be awesome to have replaced. But as I look out at that beautiful view that I see every morning, I don't think it's going to change by allowing for a 60-foot height limit. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you very much for your service.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak at this part of the public hearing? Seeing no one rise, I will call an end and close the public hearing on this particular case. Invite Ms. Bierman back to the podium and open it up now to the board.
Can we talk about the structure height? I didn't, you know, I might be naive, but I'm not really sure. I assume there's something related to the proposed use that would create a structure. Is there going to be a limit on structures, or is the limit just on buildings?
The proposed zoning condition that the applicant has offered is on the building height, which is how their ordinance addresses building height. Now, if with the use that's proposed, if there are accessory components of that use, for any use, then that would be, that wouldn't necessarily be considered a building or a structure. I think that would have to be looked at the time when the actual development plan came in to see what any of those accessory components that might be associated with any individual use would be, and what the height limit, you know, what would be approved as part of that process.
Can those heights be limited at site plan time if they're not addressed by the ordinances?
If it's not addressed by if it's not, excuse me, not addressed as a zoning condition or something specific with the ordinance that it would fall under, then in the particular case of the use, I think, that's being discussed would require a special use permit, and that is something that all of those issues would very specifically be discussed and evaluated with what was appropriate, and at the time of any special use permit, you would be able to consider the specific height limits of any aspects of the development and the impacts of those uses at that time.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had.
Anyone else?
Well, just to clarify, unfortunately, what I want to have come up with the original zoning conditions, and my iPad doesn't seem to allow me to get that. This was a zoning, thank you, appreciate that. Now let's see if okay, my recollection was right. There's no date on this. Those original zoning conditions were developed in 1990?
1990.
Okay. So the two-story limitation, and I believe Councilman Smith may have made a reference to this at the public hearing, was really originally an accommodation to those neighbors in the Ivy Meadows, Walnut Hills subdivision that were kind of nervous about what this mall was going to become. So we have a requirement here that is pretty close to 25 years old. And the only reason that we're here discussing this tonight in the manner that we are is really because of that individual zoning condition that was mandated back in the 1990s. So that was my question to you, Ms. Bierman, was when was this originally drawn up? I thought it was around the 1990s, but I wanted to make sure, because when we get around to discussing this, I do feel that this is a document that served its purpose at the time it was written. But it is also a document that probably at this point in time no longer reflects the reality of what is going on in this area. That's my only question.
Anything else? Can I borrow that from you?
You sure can.
If not, I have a few questions that have come up during the course of our discussion. And what I would like to have a handle on is what is allowable under the current zoning right now, absent this process, if there would be no rezoning. My first question is something all the way out to where the Triangle Aquatic Center is could be built at the two-story level today, correct?
Correct.
And is there, we've heard, at least in all my time on here, lots of things about multiple roadways, connectivity type things, but I know there's this big perimeter road that goes around there. If for some reason, and this is just purely speculative, if a structure were to be built that would shut off one of those two roads, are there, at site plan or at other plans, would a consideration for how much roadway access would be removed, would that be part of the deliberation at that time?
At the time of a site plan review of any development or redevelopment, the access would certainly be evaluated. Consistency with the connectivity requirements of the land development ordinance would be evaluated. So all of those issues would be specifically looked at with a development plan.
Excellent, that's good to know. And the only other question I had was to go back to what Mr. Rogers was just saying about the 1990 ordinance or the zoning conditions and what they might have been in place to serve. There was one that said something about the Hudson Belt being the tallest structure and everything else could not be any larger than that, or any taller than that, rather. And that seems to be the one furthest away from the residential areas, and we've heard a few folks talk about this transition. Is that codified anywhere? Is that a requirement that that a height should transition towards residential areas should be going down? And we've heard it brought up several times.
That's not codified in the land development ordinance. There's generally in the land, in the land use plan, one of the principles that is included is transitioning between commercial areas and neighborhoods, or between areas of different uses to have transitions. In terms of in application to a particular case with a specific height from one part of a site to the other, there's not specific codified regulations related to that.
Thank you.
Okay. I do have one question, Mr. Chair. The current zoning ordinance reflects a two-story limit in this area, correct, Mary?
Correct.
And the language is 2 stories. There are no dimensions associated with that? No.
That is correct. In the zoning conditions that were developed initially with this in the 1990s, it does make a reference to 2 stories. There's not a specific height limit in terms of how many feet that translates into, nor is there a specific definition in the ordinance as to a specific limit for how many feet constitute a building height. That was one reason, as the concerns moved, as this came through the initial public hearing, that there was some feedback from town council to make that more clear, to establish a height in feet, and that was what the change to the condition was made in response to that.
Okay, so in effect, under the 2-story condition that exists, you in fact could have a structure that exceeds the 60 feet that is being requested under this rezoning petition.
Theoretically, that would be possible. You would certainly have to look at the individual building being proposed in the nature of that structure and the need for the larger than standard storage.
Understand.
But that could be looked at.
Okay, thank you.
Are you implying that that would come before us again? I think I would read what Buck is saying, that as long as it was 2 stories, it could be an 80-foot building and would conform to the individual zoning requirements for this particular activity center. Is that not right?
Theoretically, it would, if there was any building would go through the building code, the building inspections process, and if it was theoretically, there could be an 80-foot building that was 2 stories. That would be unusually tall for 2 stories. But in terms of the specific conditions that are in the current zoning conditions, the only thing that condition speaks to is the number of stories. If any use came in that was at 2 stories, regardless of the specific height, then if that was the only issue, there would not be the need for rezoning if it was 2 stories. And then any other issues would be dealt with later in the, with whatever process that the particular use was subject to.
Thank you.
I do have some questions.
Someone here?
Yeah. To go back to that one slide, and this is, do we have any effect on the greenway with this buffer zone? Are we affecting into any greenways, changing anything there? Because I noticed in one of the maps I didn't notice before, there was a greenway that goes through that area.
Let's see. There is a proposed greenway, a future greenway or street side trail shown on the map that goes through that area. This would not affect that. The red line that I showed to illustrate the fence was not, the purpose of showing that line was more to illustrate the length along the property line, the extent of the fence. At the time of the site plan, that would certainly be looked at to make sure that, the future greenway would be, the corridor for that would be preserved.
So that blue dotted line, did anything going to happen to that proposed street side trail, or that's what Will be dealt with in the site planning?
That would be dealt with at site planning.
Okay.
The proposed condition would basically, and we may need to work with the applicant to clarify, to make sure that the wording of that condition is may need to be clarified a bit, but my understanding is with the intent of that it's the intent to replace the fence essentially in its existing location, which would not have any impact on the future Greenway Trail, and that would be looked at the time of the site plan.
Okay, because with that many children at an aquatic center, at a mall, and even the adults, I worry about the walkability and the safety factor, which is one of the things which I'm hoping in the site plan, when you do get there, that we do address the first responders being able to get in and out, which I'm sure you'll do in the site plan. And I think that I also heard that from the last comment, talking about the 4-story, which we can't really see because it's not fully built right now, on the edge, transitioning, which is going to be higher. How tall is that one?
I don't know.
But it's 4 stories.
I don't have that.
That other reason?
That sounds right. I think the parcel that is looked at is in this area here.
Okay. So I think, okay.
I don't remember the specific details of that site plan.
Okay.
If not, I have 2 pieces of clarification I'd like to just pick up on what I'm hearing. First of all, the 2 stories. As it stands right now, the part that's lined out in the staff report on item 16 is what is in place for current zoning, and that is buildings shall be limited to 2 occupiable floors with no portion of the buildings on site extending above the elevation of the highest point of the existing Hudson Belk department store. So someone, if this is in place, could not build an 80-foot building if that 80 feet were to exceed Hudson Belk. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
So the height of Hudson Belk at this moment is the governing height?
That would establish, and I don't know what the specific height of that is, but at the time of any building plan review, that would establish a maximum building height as well.
And just to clarify on this, other structures than the building itself, that would be evaluated during site plan. That's after council makes their decision on the zoning or rezoning. So at that point, neither we nor council can be heard again. That is in the hands of staff to handle it at site plan. Is that correct?
Well, if there is an outdoor recreation use, which is one of the uses that could be allowed on the site, that particular use would require a special use permit. At the time of the special use permit, the site plan is looked at. So all of these aspects of that development would be looked at by town council through the quasi-judicial hearing process in making a decision regarding the special use permit.
So there is another safeguard.
Right, and then the site plan, the final drawings with that would be looked at the staff level would have to be consistent with that special use permit that council had reviewed.
Thank you. That clears it up a great deal. Is there anything else?
When we're talking about the fence, we're talking about a physical fence structure. But I also kind of like the idea that those trees might be aging out, and if there can be, is that never considered as that buffer zone? Is there ever a consideration of buffer zones being replenished?
There are more general requirements in the land development ordinance related to buffers. If the buffers need to be maintained in good health, and at some point, if the quality of the buffer erodes, then the property owner would be required to replan and correct that.
Okay.
Any other questions of staff or of the applicant? If not, would anyone like to offer anything for consideration?
I'll make a motion. I move the board forward case number 14 REZ 36 to the town council with a recommendation for approval as it is consistent with the general plan and all other applicable plans and is reasonable and in the public interest for the reasons set forth in the staff report and presentation. Excuse me, should I be reading the second paragraph of this rather than the first?
That's just, it's a rezone.
There
I don't hear a no, so.
were no new conditions. No, just the.
There weren't any
No.
conditions.
Yeah, there were no
I think
new
it's good enough.
conditions.
Under conditions.
Would be the, in this case, there were no new conditions offered at the meeting, so it would be the first paragraph.
Okay.
So we have a motion?
I'll second.
We have a motion and we have a second. Discussion, Mr. Rogers.
First of all, I want to say this is my neighborhood also. I live in the Kingston Ridge area. I used to rent a house on Sturtevant for 3 years before we bought our home in our neighborhood, and like several people have commented this evening, I have watched for a long period of time what has happened to this particular development. Regazzi's closed. There was a standalone optometrist building that closed and was raised. Taco Bell left, that was raised. You've heard the fact that Harris Teeter has left. Sears is going. Macy's probably may close their facility because they've already announced that they're going to be closing stores nationwide. JCPenney is having financial difficulties. And as my wife reminds me every time she goes over to Cary Town Center to look for clothing, this is a C mall. And by that, it's tiered, A, B, C. You heard that at one time it was an A mall. That was probably back in the 90s when it probably was a viable place. It has slipped down to the C category. And I agree with those people that have come out and said that you just don't want that next door to you. I understand NIMBYism. The acronym means not in my backyard, but your backyard is going to get devalued if this mall continues to decline. Your backyard will probably appreciate if this mall gets revitalized. I've done a lot of things in my working career, and at one point in time, I actually was involved in retail, and I had a rented space up in North Raleigh. And I thought I was a destination site. In other words, I would be advertising, and people would come to my site simply because they were aware of it, and that's all that I needed. And I never really thought that I needed to have what I call traffic coming over my transom. That is, people walking by, seeing what I did, seeing what I sold, coming in and inquiring about our particular service. And I was in a strip center, and I was across the way from a Carmike theater. And I only did this for 3 years, and I won't go into any great detail as to why I stopped doing it, but one of the life lessons I learned out of it is, if you're in retail and you don't have foot traffic, you're going to go downhill unless you're the only game in town for whatever you're doing. Now, my wife plays mahjong in this mall every Wednesday night. I haven't been in this mall in 3 years, and I live in the neighborhood. And I really don't have any reason to go over there. So what I see here is we have a zoning condition that is specific to this particular regional activity center, and that simply says it's limited to 2 stories, with no real definition as to how tall that is. We have an existing building that is 54 feet high. So the difference is 6 feet. And as you heard Mr. Barron comment, I went out to the balloon test. Matter of fact, I went to it twice. I was there at 8 o'clock, had to take my wife to the airport, left, came back, and saw the second positioning of the balloon test. It was positioned in 3 different places. Now, I did hear the mayor's comments in the public hearing. I don't remember him saying that it had to be out to the far points of whatever, and maybe he did say that. But to me, it was much more pertinent to have the balloon test be done where this site is being renovated, i.e. the Sears store, which is going to come down. When I first saw the balloons, I thought, well, this looks pretty similar to the existing building heights. And I guess my judgment wasn't all that bad because I was only 6 feet off. The neighborhood adjacent to this mall has a berm before you that heightens the height of the buffer. Now, I used to walk through that Ivy Lane area, and that was about 10 years ago. No, 15 years ago, excuse me. I moved out in '99. I had forgotten that those houses on the perimeter of this mall actually have a raised berm, and then you have the trees, and most of those trees are mature trees that are primarily evergreens. And when I was over there for the balloon test, I got out, walked around, looked at all of this stuff and said, you know, this buffer is doing pretty much what it was designed to do. Now, the comment was made about the TAC Center, Triangle Aquatic Center, not having a buffer. But it does have a parking lot with a lot of mature trees in there. So, in a way, and I'll mention this as well, I've driven through this mall and gone around this corner turn, which now is a 3-way stop, for years. I would use it as a way to get out to Cary Town Boulevard and onto US 40 and head westbound. I only saw the Cary Aquatic Center, I probably saw 15% of it. It's a big facility. It's a very nice facility. And I certainly hope that it is not going to drown as a result of decisions that Cary makes. I think the access to that will become a 2-way access at some point in time in the future. But again, we aren't here to discuss that. What I did feel helps me in my decision to support this is when you look at the Imagine Cary and some of the things that that is developing in terms of ideas for this particular town and where it's going to go over the next 10 to 20 years. They want to see, we want to see, excuse me, not they, we, you, me, the town staff, the council, we want to see this remain a vibrant community. And quite frankly, I think this mall needs to have some flexibility in terms of making it maybe a destination site and forgetting about it being a shopping mall. It may need to be something entirely different. So I think we need to give the mall some flexibility. I think it would be a mistake if we said, well, everything has to be 60 feet. And sorry for being long on this, but I've been around a long time. My gray hair sort of validates that. I can remember North Hills. I used to live in North Raleigh. I moved here to the Triangle in 1988 and lived up near Falls Lake. Drove down Six Forks every day to get out to the IBM campus. And I remember North Hills Mall. I remember it when it was dying. you could walk in there and you'd hardly see anybody. And they raised, I believe, that whole facility. That's why what North Hills looks like now is so unique. It's because the whole thing came down. This is not an existing situation here. The mall owner has existing tenants, and by the way, I was happy to see one tenant say, I'd like to see this change. You don't see any tenants coming out and saying, well, wait a minute, we don't want that here. Because they all know they need foot traffic, or they're going to die too, just like all these other situations that I've already mentioned. I just think we'd make a mistake by trying to limit this to 60 feet across the board. Simply recognize that this is a change to a document that was written in 1990. The world's changed, retail's changed, the longevity of malls is certainly out there in jeopardy. This is going to have to go through a special use permit in front of the council if they put in recreational use, because that's not an existing category for this regional activity center. And that'll be heard out before the council. The public will probably get another chance to put its input in. And I think that Cary is smart enough to make this work and work right. But the developer needs some flexibility. Thank you.
Mr. Fisher.
Well, I concur with Mr. Rogers' statements with regard to the mall. And certainly, as you look at it over the years, there has been a decline in the activity that goes on there, and most recently with the anchor stores leaving for numerous reasons. Now, I too have lived in this neighborhood for a number of years. I lived in Sturtevant Drive, so I'm familiar with this scenario. And given what we're dealing with here, I see a definite advantage for gaining clarification by this rezoning application that we're talking about building height instead of just this two-story without a definition. So I think there is some benefit to defining what we're talking about here. I understand the concern about any structures outside of the building that may exceed that height, and it has been clarified for us. That is something that can and will be addressed as part of the overall special use permit process. So I think we've got some safeguards there to take care of that. So bottom line for me is I'm pleased to see that there's some initiative to enhance this area, to work to try to bring some vibrancy back to the mall, to this part of town, and to Cary as a whole. So therefore, I support this.
Is there any further discussion? Anyone else like to mention something?
I think that I'd like to see that mostly everyone, even those that came out against this, applauded CPL for communicating and trying to touch base with the neighbors. And we also have another destination, which is the Triangle Aquatic Center, and I do hear their concern about the parking, and I just can hope that the communications continue and that this issue also works itself out, because we have really some great opportunities here between the TAC being a destination center and maybe this mall becoming a destination, and it can be a really great symbiotic relationship that continues. So I kind of support the idea.
Any other discussion? Then I shall call this to a vote. All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say nay, please. Motion carries 7-0. At the moment, it is 8:26. We've been on this one case for nearly 2 hours. I would like to take a short, and I mean short, 5-minute break, if I may, and we will reconvene at that point and tackle the next case. We're back now, and we will begin taking our next case, which is 14 REZ 37. Ms. Grannon.
Thank you. Good evening. This is a rezoning request for property located on Pittard Sears Road on approximately 20 acres. Street address of the subject property is 336 Pittard Sears Road. An aerial view of the subject property is shown here. And the vicinity map shows the property along the west side of Pittard Sears Road, opposite the Carolina Preserve Del Webb community. According to Cary's GIS maps, there is a stream buffer along the western portion of the subject property, and field determination of that feature will be required at the time of development plan review. Cary's Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources Master Plan does not show any greenway trails or street side trails on the subject property, but this map shows you the other trails in the vicinity and the proximity of the property to the American Tobacco Trail here further to the west. O'Kelly Chapel Road is designated on Cary's Comprehensive Transportation Plan as a thoroughfare, and Pittard Sears Road as a local road. The land use plan designation is medium-density residential. This property is part of the joint Cary-Chatham County land use plan, so there's a note on the plan that calls for a density of up to 4 dwelling units per acre. The current zoning is a Chatham County zoning of R1, and the proposed zoning is transitional residential conditional use. At the Town Council public hearing, the conditions proposed by the applicant were to limit the use to detached residential age-restricted housing and associated amenities, and that the density shall not exceed 3.1 dwelling units per acre. Property owners within 800 feet of the subject property were notified. The property was not eligible for a protest petition because it is not in Cary's ETJ and did not have Cary zoning. There were concerns expressed at the town council meeting regarding buffering and regarding stream protection. Since the town council meeting, the applicant has provided a new zoning condition, and that would be to provide a 30-foot wide type A opaque buffer for a distance of approximately 520 feet along the western property line. And this is a map that shows you that 520-foot distance. There is a requirement for a type B buffer along the entire property length, and this is showing you what the applicant's proposing to enhance that planting standard so that it would come up to a opaque or a type A standard. This concludes staff's presentation. Following the public hearing, I will be available for your questions.
Thank you. We will now open the public hearing. We'll begin with the applicant. And the same rules and guidelines from the previous public hearing do apply.
Good evening, members of the Planning Board, Planning and Zoning Board. My name is Glenda Top with Glenda S. Top and Associates, and I'm here tonight on behalf of the property owners, the Lester family. As staff pointed out, we are requesting TR conditional use zoning. The property is located in the joint Chatham-Cary land use plan. The land use designation for this property is medium-density residential. Under the medium-density residential category, both attached and detached residential uses are allowed, as are limited non-residential uses. By zoning condition, we have limited the use to detached residential, age-restricted housing, and also neighborhood recreation. And we have also limited the density to a maximum of 3.1 units per acre. At the public hearing, a property owner spoke up about the adjacent buffer along the west of our property in Chatham County, and also expressed concerns regarding stormwater management. I first want to talk about the zoning condition that we added. Ms. Grannon pointed out the slide that shows where we have enhanced the 30-foot type B buffer to a 30-foot A buffer. The reason that that line is where it is on the map. There is a stream buffer that has been verified. It's also on the adjacent property. Where that 520 feet ends is where the stream buffer begins, and there's not distance between that stream buffer and the western property line for any homes to occur. So that is why the distance of that exists on the map. So between where that 520 feet of type A stops, there would be the B buffer, but there will be no development at that point. As far as the stormwater management issue, we are working in conjunction with the Wizard and Ravenel, who are the engineers on the project, and they did go out and look at the stream in the area, and it was their findings both with an adjacent development called Dunhill and also with the development that's occurring adjacent to this site that the stormwater measures at this point are in place and meet the town standards. As was pointed out in the staff report, a rezoning is to determine whether or not the land uses and densities that are being proposed are appropriate for this site. We believe that the rezoning for age-restricted detached residential is the best use of the property. The properties to the north and east of the Lester parcel share the same land use classification and have also been approved for age-restricted housing. These two developments are the courtyards at O'Kelly Chapel and Carolina Preserve. The property to the south is also zoned TR and has the same MDR classification, and also the property to the west, as we pointed out, is detached residential R1 in Chatham County, and that's where we have enhanced the buffer where the adjacent proposed homes would be located. The joint plan, as was pointed out, does designate the property for MDR. It does allow for densities up to 4 units per acre. Our density by zoning condition can be a maximum of 3.1, so it is below what is permitted in the joint plan. The rezoning is in compliance with the joint Cary Chatham County plan. Also want to point out that the proposed use is compatible with development in the area. As we all know, this area does seem to be an area that has grown with age-restricted housing, and it is a type of housing that has become very popular, and the need is still in Cary for that type of housing. It also has a minimal impact on the schools because of the minimal number of school-age children, so the impact is not there with the schools. The town can provide public services to this property. There isn't a company annexation with this property, and this property is adjacent to Cary town limits. We believe that the zoning conditions that are being offered, along with the LDO requirements, will protect the adjacent properties from any development that occurs in this area. And again, just want to point out that any development that occurs on the property would be or will be required to meet the requirements of the LDO, and that includes stormwater, because I know there is that concern that was addressed about stormwater, and we will have to comply with those conditions. We do believe, again, that this is the excellent use of the property, and we would ask for the board's support. Want to add that the engineer that's working on this is here, along with the potential developer of the property, to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, if there's anyone who would like to address the board during the public hearing, you may come forward. Once again, if you could start with your name, that would be great.
Hello, my name is Chris Reisig. I live at 451 Chatham Glen. I am the property owner that addressed the town council. I am south of this property, and I thank you for the opportunity. First, with regard to the increased buffer, my neighbors that it affects sincerely appreciate the applicants recognizing that there is a huge difference between 3.1 dwelling units per acre, which is what this is stated, and ours, which is 1 dwelling unit on 5 acres. So that is an extremely huge difference. The additional buffer, 30 feet with a type A, we sincerely thank you and see that you recognize there is a big difference there in accordance with the joint land use document between Town of Cary and Chatham County. I also want to express thanks to one of your staff members, Mr. Kirk Stafford. He came out with me and we did several creek walks, and I found him to be extremely professional. I appreciated his candor, and he helped me understand this process a little bit more. And I have to admit, I've read more ordinances and regulations than I ever thought I would. I have gone through your growth management plan, the joint land use plan, as I said, and your land development ordinances, which is a mouthful, specifically Chapter 7. I find yours are very thorough. I find they are much more easier to read than the EPA Clean Water Act and the regulations on turbidity, stormwater management, and sediment control. After reviewing the staff report and the creek walks with Mr. Stafford, as well as the state representative, I will respectfully disagree with the applicant's justification statement that the proposed development will not have a negative impact on adjacent property. My property is already being impacted by phase 1 of the courtyards of O'Kelly Chapel. I have provided you with 2 pictures which I think show this in full color. The first one is December 29th, 2013. This is a bridge on my property over the stream, which we call Goat Creek, because Miss Rosa Lester, her goats used to always wander down there. That's why we kind of named it that. This is following almost 2 inches of rain the day after. That is what I experienced. The bottom picture, it was April 23rd. I think that was, approximately a week or so after the town council meeting, maybe a little bit longer. That had only been 3/4 of an inch of rain, and this had been 3 days after that rain, and that's what I'm looking at on my property. It reminds me of the Willy Wonka Chocolate River. So that is why I respectfully disagree that this is not going to have a negative impact on my property. As I reviewed your LDOs, I would ask, what was the downstream impact analysis conclusion for this stream? My observation is it's a tremendous impact. The horrible turbid waters that are being sent downstream are having an impact on the aquatic life. A simple observation I've made is since the town council meeting, I have seen more snakes in variety and number come up from that stream than I have in the 10+ years I've lived there. The sediment buildup has also reshaped areas of this stream in the last 6 months more than in the 10+ years I've lived there. And yes, I agree with Mr. Stafford and the state representative that the sediment is coming from bank erosion upstream, but as I read your Chapter 7.4.3 of your land LDOs, it is accelerated because of increased velocity of runoff due to the land disturbing activities. On average, I've seen this stream jump the banks 3 to 4 times a year since I've lived there, and I truly dread what's going to happen when it does this next time. Throughout your LDOs, I truly feel there is a common theme to identify and protect vulnerable areas from damage from erosion and/or sedimentation. If approval is recommended, what are the plans to mitigate what is occurring downstream on my property as a result of this activity? It is truly not my intent to take a not in my backyard stance. I am only attempting to protect an area of my property that we have spent time and resources to create and maintain an area with trails, bridges, and scenic spots in a natural manner because it enhances our quality of life and adds value to my property. In closing, I regret to say I cannot offer support for this or any project west of Pittard Sears that will have this type of impact on my property. I would ask that the situation were reversed and I was impacting downstream in one of your many beautiful open space areas you provide for your residents. How would you feel? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers for the public hearing in this particular case? If not, then I will close the public hearing and we may now discuss it at the board level.
I have a couple questions from Scranton. My first question is in regard to the to the table included in your staff report titled Schools, where you have the counts broken out between the elementary, middle, and high school. I'm curious if that is taking into account the fact that this is an age-restricted community, or if those numbers are generated.
You'll note it says the proposed age-restricted condition may significantly reduce the number of students. So
okay, I thought
there, yeah, there is no formula that we're aware of yet. So yes, that's very possible that could be greatly reduced.
Okay, thanks for clarifying. My second question is if you could maybe clarify the stormwater mitigation requirements. And I believe that this has come up in previous zoning cases. And it's my understanding that the applicant is responsible solely for the stormwater generated from their site and not stormwater passing through.
I'm going to ask Mr. Flynn from our staff to speak to that. Just going to try to move this off the slide, sorry.
Good evening. I'm Matt Flynn. I'm in the Stormwater Management Group. I'm a Stormwater Field Services Administrator. So any new developments required to mitigate the 1, 2, 5, and 10-year storm events for peak flow. The 1-year event has been identified by the state as the event that's most likely to erode stream banks. The 2, 5, and 10 are additional to ensure you don't have peak flow that would cause flooding on properties that would otherwise have been unaffected. Does that answer your question?
So would that take into account any upstream activities, or is that solely concentrated on that site?
They're required to mitigate their footprint.
Okay.
Yep.
That's what I thought. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, while you're here. So I look at this and I think if all of these land disturbances that are going on in this area are following our rules, then it appears that our rules aren't working too well. Or is something going to happen during the rest of the development process that will cure this problem?
Our requirements exceed state, federal requirements. We require skimmers to discharge from the surface down, from the top of the water column down, which reduces turbidity. Turbidity, discoloration of water is an allowable discharge provided you have all of mitigations in place. And like I said, our requirements exceed. The site that was referred to was found to be in compliance. There's also, during large rain events, turbidity is contributed by natural stream bank erosion. So you'll have discoloration of water from sediment that is alluvial sediments that are found in channels that go into resuspension. You'll have a contribution from construction, which is an unavoidable discharge. What happens during construction and post-construction is mitigation. It's not replication. So our standards exceed, and the site was in compliance.
Does anyone else have anything?
Just a follow-up question to what caller was asking. Is there a way to determine the impact based on construction, sediment erosion that causes the flooding versus natural sediment erosion?
Generally, what happens is when you have a construction site, the laws are there to remove the heavier sediments to come out of suspension. The finer sediments, which causes discoloration, are going to pass through the higher portions of the water column. The only way you can really do that is to go out and do an analysis, and a boring analysis of the existing channel and the sediment depositions downstream. The state of North Carolina did that in this case and found a majority of the sediment to be from the stream bank erosion and redeposited. Having said that, during large rain events, you are going to have discolored water leave a construction site. It's an unavoidable discharge. The only way you really could eliminate that would be to put in a wastewater treatment plant and capture it and flocculate it out.
Is this stream 50-foot buffer or 100-foot? I know it's 50-foot by the North Carolina.
That stream has a
there a-
50-foot stream buffer because it's soil survey indicated. Larger stream channels that are on the USGS, we have a 100-foot stream buffer requirement.
Okay, so only 50 feet is undisturbed by this.
That stream buffer has a 50-foot undisturbed stream buffer. That's correct.
Anything else from Mr. Flynn? Thank you. Are there any other questions for the staff at all? I have just one, and it's about the first zoning condition. I understand that the age restrictions are sign of the times and lots of areas to do. I'm just curious that it's a zoning condition. I'm not sure. Is that a requirement? Is it a benefit? Why would that be listed as a zoning condition?
Because of the concerns about schools and because of the applicant. And the applicant can speak to this, but the end user is proposed to be the same developer as the adjacent property, which is an age-restricted community.
That makes good sense.
Can I make one, speaking of age restrictions?
Absolutely.
That's probably one of the things that, caught my attention years ago, maybe 10 years ago, when we first started to kind of, creep into Chatham County. Age-restricted housing became very popular because Chatham County didn't have any or many schools in that area because of the lake. They didn't provide services out there. They don't have schools. So, 10 years ago, that sounded like a great idea. I guess I'm a little bit disturbed that, this much later, we're still stacking all of the age-restricted housing in Chatham County. Well, I know we've done it in other places because of schools. So, as a board, I think it's something think we want to keep our eye on. This one looks okay because it's kind of surrounded by the same thing. It seems logical, but, I'd really like to not spend the next few years looking at age-restricted housing in Chatham County. Those kids have got to go somewhere. Wake County would probably appreciate it if we would give them a break too.
Is there anything else for the staff? If not, would someone like to make a motion in one direction or the other?
I have a motion. I move that the board forward case number 14 REZ 37 to Town Council with a recommendation for approval, as it is consistent with the comprehensive plan and all other applicable plans, and it is reasonable and in the public interest for the reasons set forth in the staff report and presentation.
There is a motion.
I'll second.
And a second. Discussion, Mr. Reed.
Yes, so I'm in support of this for several reasons. First and foremost is the age restricted. That definitely limits the number of individuals in schools, which has obviously been a very vocal concern of this board and council. So I definitely think that mitigates that. I like the inclusion of the zoning condition regarding the increased buffer. I think that the applicant's willing to kind of go a little more on accommodating a neighbor. I definitely think that's a plus. And the 3.1 density is on the lower end of the medium density, so I definitely think that's something going forward as well.
Mr. Randolph.
Just to add on to that, I think the reasoning or at least the justification provided for concerns over the flooding were addressed to my adequacy in terms of what was actually causing the applicant's concern for the flooding. It's probably more of a natural sediment than it is actual construction. Just the second point is that the area, as Carla stated, is already full of this type of development. So this development makes logical and compatible sense with the surrounding area. And I think that's important because you want to keep the same or at least similar look, especially in that local area. And I think this will achieve that result.
Any other discussion on this motion?
I'm going to support the motion, but I don't want to discount the concerns about the stream. I live in a very similar situation. I'm facing lots of development around us, and, I have a stream, and, yeah, the snakes are getting crazy. We laugh because there's also going to be a greenway through there, and we used to think we'd sit there with a stopwatch and see how fast people would run through there because it is covered in snakes. But anyway, I can't vote against this because I'd have to vote against everything. I think in general, it's our standards. I realize they're higher than the state's, but obviously they're still not enough. And I've seen the same evidence that this gentleman has seen.
Any other discussion? If not, then would all who are in favor of this motion please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, nay, please. Motion carries 7-0. Thank you, Ms. Grant. We now move to our cases that have no public hearing, and that will be round 31, items B, D, and E of the Land Development Ordinance amendments. Ms. Spearman.
Thank you. This just shows the schedule that we've gone through for these rounds of the round 31 amendments. You did discuss these at your work session on April 27th. There were 5 items included in round 31. Only 3, the one shown in yellow, will be discussed tonight. The remaining 2 items were sent back to a town council work session, and they will be coming forward to you at a later date. First item relates to buffer and tree protection enforcement. This item would result in higher fines and typically increased replanting requirements where required landscape materials are damaged or disturbed. This item was drafted after receiving input and direction from town council during a work session last December. This table summarizes the proposed changes to our fine structure. It would basically double the fine for entering a tree protection area and establish the fine assessed per square foot of disturbed area as the top of the current range, and would also include a fine for the first instance of severe pruning. We're also looking at standards for revegetating buffers that have been disturbed to be more performance-based. We would begin with a base number of various trees and types of trees and shrubs that would be the number determined based on the length of the buffer and the required buffer type. The amendment also provides for some flexibility in reviewing the site plan so that staff could take site-specific factors into account and make some modification of the number of plants required to address specific site issues. This is a list of the factors that could be taken into account where the base amount of required vegetation would not feasibly be planted within the area available. Consistent with good horticultural practices, it would be to the advantage of the plants. Then the planted material could be reduced, and then a fine assessed for the balance that couldn't be accommodated on the site. There are also some additional points of clarification related to procedural changes, applicability, appeals process, and a definition of disturbed area was clarified. And finally, in terms of how the text is put together, we reorganized a couple of sections of the text to try to incorporate these changes and to make it more clear. At the public hearing, there were no citizen or council comments related to this particular item. We did get some input from the development community and will be reaching out to property owners, landscapers, and property managers in educating the community about these changes, particularly revegetation standards and fines. The next item relates to a new use, a new potential use or activity, motor vehicle restoration. This basically would enable reuse of certain buildings that are for auto repair located in the HMXD and MXD subdistricts of the town center. This amendment was initiated by the town council in response to a new business that opened up in a space that had been previously occupied by auto repair business, but that had lost its nonconforming status. Basically, since 2003, the LDO does specifically exclude new auto repair uses in the MXD and HMXD subdistricts. This just lists some of the pros and cons in looking at this particular amendment. It would address an existing vehicle restoration business that's operating in a portion of the town center and would generally provide an option for reuse of buildings in certain areas that may be vacant at this point. On the opposing side, this amendment would limit redevelopment within those sub-districts for uses that are more consistent with the current vision for downtown as we move forward. At the public hearing, there were two options presented for consideration with this, trying to take the direction that we had received and put together some options that we thought could best address this. At the public hearing, there were no speakers. However, we did get direction from town council to make sure that an option was provided that addressed all aspects of the existing use that was the subject that brought this, the need for this consideration to our attention. At this point, following the public hearing and in further consideration of the particular use, we do have two revised options now. The first option is the staff recommendation that there be no change to the existing regulations. Option two is an option that would allow vehicle repair in the MXD and the HMXD sub-districts. This would fully satisfy or be met by the business in question. And basically the standards that would come into play with that would be that the building would be, was legally used for vehicle repair at some point in the past. The building had been vacant for at least 24 months, and that outdoor storage would be limited to 25% of the lot area and would be located behind the building and screened from view of public streets so that trying to minimize the impacts if the use is developed. And finally, item E, there are a number of technical procedural and minor amendments. There's several of these. They're listed in your staff report, and I'll be glad to go over any of those if you have questions. And that concludes my comments. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions we have at this point?
For the motor vehicle restoration, I'm curious as to why staff recommended no change.
Currently, when you look at the TCAP, the Town Center Area Plan, when that was adopted in 2003, it recognized that there are a number of automotive-related uses in the downtown area. And in moving forward, there were several districts where new uses would be allowed. And in two of those districts, the HMXD, the high-intensity mixed use, and the mixed-use district or sub-districts, it was specified that those uses could continue that were there now, but if they were to be discontinued so that they lost a non-conforming status, that new uses would not be permitted. And given the prevalence of a number of automotive uses in the area, the staff's concern was that in order to better facilitate development and maintain any opportunities for redevelopment in the site more consistent with the ultimate vision with the town center, that we would recommend that there not be any change.
So if we were to adopt the staff recommendation, the specific use that initiated all this, it wouldn't happen? They would be out of business?
It would continue to be an illegally established use. Yes.
That's all I have.
Anyone else on items B, D, or E? If not, would there be a motion in the near future?
So we have to make an option on the motor vehicle. So the motion would be to adopt and then to a specific option. Okay.
I believe so. Option 1 or 2.
Can you go back to those options?
Okay, let's see.
I will make a motion. So I move that the board forward LDO amendment PL 15046A to Town Council with a recommendation for approval as it is consistent with the comprehensive plan and all other applicable plans and is reasonable and in the public interest for the reasons set forth in the staff report and presentation. And I would recommend that we adopt option 2 for the motor vehicle restoration. And that would be the option to allow vehicle repair in MXD and HMXD areas.
And to accept B and E at the staff recommendation level
Yes.
as well. So there's a motion on the floor right now for option 2 for D. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Discussion on this motion, please. Ms. Sadler.
Based on our meeting that we had on this, on our work session, I kind of had the feeling we were leaning toward the option 2. I was a little bit surprised by option 1. I understand what is behind it, and I am not generally in favor of changing the LDO for a specific business. On the other hand, from the discussion that we had, the fact that a building has been vacant for 24 months, if they do have an opportunity to reuse it, then I would be in favor of allowing vehicle repair back in there.
Streets?
Sure. I don't have too much to add to that, but my kind of take on option 2, and first of all, thank you for staff for giving us a nice overview of this during the work session. I definitely think it answered all the questions I had. The reason that I'm leaning towards option 2 is because honestly, I don't really see much of an issue with a continued use. And as Carla alluded to, you have a vacant building for 24 months. I would definitely rather see that turn into another automotive repair or motor vehicle restoration establishment as opposed to remaining vacant. And I agree that we shouldn't write the rules to individuals, but I would definitely lean towards option 2, even without the specific circumstance that's at play here. So that's why I'm supporting this.
Any other discussion on this motion?
I have a question. So where would a special use come in then? So if you went with option 1 to not get the company out of business, can they go for a special use?
The way that option 2 is currently written, we dropped the special use. The initial, one of the initial options included having the various criteria and having that be a special use. Given how narrow the focus is and how the criteria are fairly specific, just procedurally for option 2, we were proposing just to allow that as a permitted use if it meets these criteria, so it would not be necessary to go back through town council through a quasi-judicial hearing. So the current option under option 2 would be just as a permitted use, provided that it met those requirements.
Okay, so if they went with option 1, they would have to go back and go through the whole hearing?
If they went, there is no option with option, there is no option to request it with option 1 because the LDO currently does not permit a special use to be requested for that use. It's simply not allowed.
Any other discussion on this? I just point out a clarification that option 2 does contain an awful lot of limitations and restrictions, and like was mentioned earlier, we had a very thorough work session on this, and the options were explained in great detail. So it's not a carte blanche by any means to just allow every one of these type of facilities to pop up in our area. It's very, very limited and very protective of the current way of doing things. So I just thought I would point that out. But the motion is on the floor at this point for B, accepted with staff, D, option 2, and for E to be accepted. Is that correct?
Correct.
There is no further discussion. I'll ask for a vote. All in favor of that motion, would you please say aye?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed, say no, please. We are 7-0. The motion passes unanimously. Our cases are concluded for tonight. We have new and old business. I do not believe there is any that has popped up on our agenda. There is no need for a closed session. Before I ask for an adjournment, I want to just mention one thing. I'm sure I speak for everybody on this board and for our members who are absent today when we say thank you and we wish the very best to Ricky Barker, one of our really great public servants in this town and a friend of this board, and Loudoun County, Virginia is getting a stellar planning director, and so we wish you the very best. Thank you, sir. And with that, a motion to adjourn would be eagerly anticipated. Motion?
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you and good evening.
This has been a production of Cary TV. Visit the Town of Cary's website at townofcary.org.